Welcome to this webinar on Sustainable ChemTalk, Decoding Great Practices in Product Communication. This webinar is hosted by the Consumer Information Program of the 10-year Framework of Programs on Sustainable Consumption and Production at the One Planet Network of the United Nations Environment Program. My name is Arnau Izaguirre, and I'm a legal officer at the Competition and Consumer Policies Branch of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. I am here as one of the 3 co-leads of the Consumer Information Program, along with the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection of Germany, and Consumers International, the membership organization for consumer groups around the world. UNCTAD is the focal point within the United Nations system on the integrated treatment of trade and interrelated issues, which include consumer protection. And as such, we oversee the implementation of the United Nations guidelines for consumer protection, which are the only multilaterally agreed instrument on the issue of consumer protection. The guidelines recognize 3 legitimate needs of consumers that are particularly relevant to today's webinar. First is the protection of consumers from hazards to their health and safety. Second is access by consumers to adequate information to enable them to make informed choices according to individual wishes and needs. And finally, it is the promotion of sustainable consumption patterns. If we are going to protect our planet, we need to make markets work for people and for the planet. And in so doing, we need to move away from the conception of consumers as passive receivers of goods and services and transition toward ones where the consumer is an actor of change. This webinar will discuss the importance of providing information on chemicals and material ingredients as part of product sustainability information communicated to consumers, which is the first step towards making adequate access to consumers and allowing them to make informed choices and thus empowering them in this green transition. We are gathering for you leading experts in consumer protection, chemical management, and environmental sustainability. The webinar will formally launch the report on communicating chemicals in products, global guidance on providing voluntary chemical-related sustainability information for products, developed by UNEP and the Consumer Information Program of the One Planet Network. The document draws upon the high-level principles of the guidelines for providing product sustainability information, also authored by UNEP and the International Trade Center. We are grateful for the generous financial support of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency for the development of this report. We will start with a presentation of the report on communicating chemicals in products by its author, Stuart Moore, project manager at Bioregional, and then we will host a panel discussion moderated by Marcos Yerides, chemical specialist at UNEP. I would like to conclude by thanking the UNEP Secretariat for the excellent organization of this webinar, in particular, Leticia Montero and Maelis Nizan from the Consumption and Production Unit at the Industry and Economy Division. Without further ado, I wish you all a very successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnav. I will share my screen. Is everyone seeing that okay?
Yes, we can see it very well.
Great, thank you, Miles. Okay, so thank you, Miles and Leticia and Arno and everyone. And my name is Stuart. I am a technical consultant at Bioregional, and we authored the guidance alongside colleagues from UNEP. We completed the guidance in 2022. And communicating chemicals in products is a vital aspect of improving sustainability. The impacts of chemicals in products are receiving increased global attention. There's been a number of reports in the past few years that have bolstered this viewpoint and really raised awareness on the subject. One that has been particularly important has been the UNEP Global Chemicals Outlook 2 report that came out a few years ago. And so it's estimated there are various estimates of the number of chemicals in the market today and the degree to which chemicals are approaching the safe global limits for toxicity. The ICCA Chem estimate is there's between 40 and 60 chemicals on the market today. There's other estimates that think this may be over 300,000 products. Sorry, 300,000 chemicals on the market. It's very difficult to quantify when a chemical is actually placed in the market, or how long it stays there for, or whether it's actually being used in commerce. But there are so many chemicals on the market, it's very difficult for regulation to keep pace. We're seeing more and more legislation being put in place on environmental claims and communications in different regions, different countries, but this is not present in all countries, and this is very difficult as well sometimes to regulate the fast pace of environmental claims and communications. There's obviously a lot of focus on sustainability claims around carbon emissions and other areas. Chemicals is one that may be difficult to communicate as consumers often may not have such specialist chemical knowledge. So good communication is essential and support for companies and marketing and comms professionals in manufacturing and retailer companies. So this guidance has been put together to cover good communications around chemicals of concern, specifically in building materials, electronics, textiles, and toys. And I think it's very interesting to note the role that the consumer plays in demanding safer chemicals in products. We've seen a number of campaigns that the consumer has really been instrumental in improving the situation around things like making advocating for strict limits on chemicals in things like toys and textiles that will be used and worn by younger children. Campaigns that have looked at endocrine disrupting chemicals, and the consumer has played a big role in being educated on that and demanding safer chemicals in products. But it's very important to be able to support communicators to reach consumers with all levels of knowledge of chemicals. Really, it's very important that consumers who don't have specialist chemical knowledge can be given safer products and receive helpful communications in this area. So the guidance that we've produced very much promotes a life cycle approach to chemical identification, chemical management throughout the value chain, and communication of the chemical impacts and safety of products. So not just the chemical impacts that might be seen of the product when it's in its use phase, but also considering what is better chemical manufacture, what is a inherently safer chemistry that is preferable and should be moved towards, or what is the chemical impact at the end of life of the product. And so improving transparency of information is vital. Manufacturing supply chains for companies and products will often span different global regions, and often the chemical information is not always available throughout the value chain for products. The guide aims to support efforts to really talk well about products where there's been some really good innovation in developing safer chemicals and materials. And so we are seeing some really interesting safer chemistries on the market, some products that are using more benign chemicals, benign by design, greener chemistries. And so there is some really good practice in producing these safer products, and having the support to communicate well about these and know what companies should and shouldn't say is important. It's important to consider the confidentiality aspects of chemicals in products. Often it's necessary for companies who have put a lot of effort into research and development to also be able to protect what they have done in that, and make sure that they are not losing the competitive advantage they have gained by producing a safer chemistry. And so the guidance looks into how you can communicate transparently, but also maintain confidentiality where that's needed. It considers the precautionary principle in terms of talking about what you know is safe rather than not what you don't know is safe, and various examples where you've seen certain sort of myth busting that is needed in communications, where there are various claims made, and it's important to recognize where those claims maybe don't have as much meaning as they should do, where there's some very generic phrases used. So moving away from those generic phrases in communication to more specific, more meaningful communication. So the guidance includes some best practice examples. One example is the textile manufacturer Tentree. They are looked into as a good practice example. They're very proactive in their communications. They seek to educate the consumer and educate the consumer at the right level. Look at different metrics. Look at other aspects of sustainability, such as the carbon footprint of their textiles, alongside maybe certifications they have for safer chemical use. The guidance explores some of the approaches of certification schemes. And it looks at also some recommendations for policymakers and procurers as how they can specify safer chemicals in things like green public procurement, but also support market growth for safer products. One example we've seen recently in that area is for things like soy-based adhesives, which have become much more cost-effective due to the support of green public procurement. The guidance draws on the 10 principles for communicating product sustainability information, which have been developed through the One Planet Network. And we look at each principle in the guidance and provide a do and don't example for each principle. So the 5 fundamental principles are explored. And so these are reliability, relevance, and clarity. So reliability is a vital aspect of good communications around sustainability related to chemicals, building claims on a reliable basis, making sure that things like standards and test methods that have been used and are the appropriate state-of-the-art methods are communicated. Things like testing are a vital aspect to support good communications. Testing is obviously not always possible in all regions by all companies. Testing can be expensive, but the process of working with market regulation bodies where possible, and a collaborative approach there, and be able to draw on some robust test data, even if it's sort of the manufacturer's own testing is important. So reliability is very important. Relevance of the claim is another really important aspect, making sure that the communication goes beyond legal minimums, because consumers are not always aware of the minimum level of legal compliance that the company has to adhere to, or may not be aware of what are the main hotspots in a product. It's very important that the significant chemical hotspots are talked about. And clarity is very important as an aspect. So this is explored alongside a section that looks at kind of general sustainability claims to be avoided. So language like environmentally friendly or eco-friendly, or if a term like organic is going to be used, making sure that's backed up with evidence or a certification, such as the Global Organic Textile Standard. So these fundamental principles are the really essential bedrock of good communication, and these are explored in some detail. Transparency and accessibility are 2 other of the fundamental principles, and I think transparency is a vital one when it comes to chemicals, making sure that information is passed along the value chain, but is also communicated well to consumers. And consumers, as mentioned before, have different levels of knowledge. So one example that we've looked at is the processes used by Target, a flooring company, and so they've really made an effort to promote material transparency by using material health statements. So you can see this at the bottom. This will look at the different chemicals that are used in some of their flooring products, and in these material health statements, where they have phased out an orthophthalate plasticizer in the flooring, they are very transparent in saying what substitute they have used in there, rather than making a more opaque claim where they just say it's free of this substance without saying what has replaced it. And in terms of accessibility, this is very important as well in good communications and marketing activities. They have very accessible information. You can find documents at the product level. You can search all the documents across the product range. There's not too much information at the sort of the product page level, such as to overwhelm the consumer, but you can find what you're looking for, and they have good accessible statements and education pieces on things like, what is the issue surrounding plasticizers in flooring that the industry has tried to address. There are 5 aspirational principles that we explore, and these are really principles to enable communications activities to go above and beyond and really exercise best practice. So the 3 dimensions of sustainability looks at considering things like economic, environmental, and social dimensions to sustainability. And collaboration has been a key one that we've seen. So, for example, in the current time and industries that are looking to phase out PFAS in their products, it's been interesting to see what has happened in the outdoor clothing sector to collaborate with industry, but to collaborate with universities and other research bodies and organizations like the Green Science Policy Institute, who will provide PFAS-free product lists. So this collaborative approach is useful for consumer communications. Another example from Tentree has been how they have very transparent information on the factories they use and the certifications those factories have that relate to social and employee and labour rights aspects of productions of the products and chemical safety aspects in relation to that. Behaviour change and longer term impacts and a multi-channel and innovative approach is another aspect to really involve the consumer in their role in the product stewardship. So, for example, we looked at the example of Fairphone and how they very much involve the consumer in the product's journey. They have a modular phone. They look to have mechanical connections instead of the phone being glued shut. The consumer is able to repair or take apart the product themselves and look to get it repaired. They use things like repairability scores, and so that's one way of engaging the consumer in those aspects. Or we've seen some interesting examples from Tretford and Marmoleum, two flooring companies who use fewer chemicals in their flooring, who really go to the consumer to enable them to hold samples. They use things like Marmoleum uses a roadshow for their linoleum flooring, which enables the consumer to sort of change their perceptions over some of the more common conventional flooring products. Some of the best practice approaches in communicating chemicals have been seen from outside the manufacturers and suppliers, from organizations like TCO Certified, who take a very proactive approach to chemical management in their certification of electronics products. So they have a strategy that looks at an approved list for chemicals. So this is a smaller list, but this is chemicals where they know there are the chemical has been assessed and they're of lower impact, and so this takes much more a proactive rather than reactive approach to certification. And the global minimum transparency standard, which Olga will speak more about later, but this is an initiative to really have a global reach and standardize information, but enable better information flow and transparency in the supply chain, which I think we've seen interesting examples of this in the things like embodied carbon and EPDs and energy efficiency information, but really to share more data that's standardized on chemicals. This is one initiative that's really pushing to improve this. So some overarching recommendations from the guidances, and I just have a couple of slides left. Manufacturers and suppliers, it's very important for these companies and their communications professionals within these companies to work proactively and build relationships with regulatory bodies. The more there's a transparent dialogue there and regulatory bodies understand their issues, and communications professionals are checking their claims, understanding what they should and shouldn't say and what might be problematic. This dialogue between these two organizations, regulatory bodies and the companies is a very useful one to maintain transparency. I think it's very important for industry to be proactive in their communications with the consumer and be open about where there is an issue. So, for example, you can see on the right, the Patagonia have talked very very openly about how industry faces a problem for phasing out endurable water repellents, some certain waterproofing compounds that are very persistent in the environment. Further work to map the supply chain and understand data gaps is vital, because this can just reduce the instances where companies don't quite know what chemicals are in their products, and so improving that dialogue is vital, and collaboration within the sector where possible is another important way of tackling some of these problems as a sector on the whole. And I think policymakers supporting regulatory frameworks and strong enforcement on chemical compliance is vital. There are companies who are trying to very much to do things like testing to check on their claims, and it's important there's a level playing field for those companies. And safer chemical use in public procurement there is some good practice out there. We are seeing some improvements on specifications for products like adhesives or flooring, being able to help companies and reward them with public procurement contracts that may be longer term, may enable their products to be procured at scale, and that can help make these greener chemistries more cost effective. So I think as well, bringing the chemicals and building materials sectors close together can support a greater understanding of the chemical hotspots and release points, certainly for build materials as one industry. Obviously, the guidance is looking to address toys and textiles and electronics as well, and we've seen some different collaborations there. But this can certainly support better communication where those industries are working together, and they're not siloed with the building materials companies perhaps buying certain products but not having full understanding of that, or the chemical designers not understanding exactly the potential entry points or the life cycle of the product and where there may be chemical hotspots. So I think that kind of activity can support good communication and both parties knowing where the risks and hotspots are. So thank you very much. It was really interesting to work on this guidance with UNEP and go through a consultation process and understand where some of the hotspots are for products manufacturers, and where this may be problematic for communications professionals. So yeah, that's the end of my section there, and I'll pass back over to Arno. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can now move to the roundtable. So I'm going to ask my moderator, Marcos, if would like to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud, and thank you, Stuart, for the presentation. Indeed, it's a very useful guidance what you have developed, and very straightforward, and I believe it would be helpful for any stakeholder interested in better communicating information about chemicals in products. So moving on to the panel discussion, today we actually have three panelists which cover quite a broad, a wide spectrum of stakeholders. So I'm quite convinced we would be able to have a very informative discussion. So just to briefly present the panelists. So we have Olga Speranskaya, who is a health and environment justice, works at the Health and Environment Justice Support. She's the co-director of the Health and Environment Justice Support. She's also a senior advisor to the International Pollutants Elimination Network, and represents civil society organizations in the steering group of the UNEP Chemicals in Products program. She works with countries on policy and regulation, and focuses on human rights to information. So welcome, Olga. The second panelist today is Ahmad Ansari. He is a partnerships director of the Zero Discharge Hazardous Chemicals. And as a partnerships director, Ahmad has the role and responsibility to advance ZDHC's global stakeholder engagement and business development strategies. And his professional expertise focuses on sustainability and related business operations. So welcome, Ahmad, as well. And last but not least, we have Sriyanka Mendis, who is the Research and Development Manager at Union Chemicals PLC in Sri Lanka. Sriyanka has a chemical background, and he has over 20 years of experience in chemical issues. So as you can see, the panelists will be able to talk from different angles. So again, I'm pretty convinced we'll have a very informative discussion. And without further ado, I would like to go into the first question that I have for the panelists today, and specifically for Olga. So Stuart already mentioned that you would be talking to us about the global minimum transparency system. So would be very interesting to hear what it is and how it can help companies provide accurate information about chemicals in materials and products, and to different groups of stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcus, and thank you very much, Stuart, for the great presentation and for highlighting the importance of the global minimum transparency standard in this guidance. So I would like to say that the global minimum transparency standards, or GMTS, is a concept that was developed jointly by Health and Environment Justice Support, Swedish Society for Nature Conservation, and Groundwork South Africa. And it builds on the same principles as the SAICOM Chemicals and Products Program, prioritizing disclosure of harmful chemicals based on their hazardous properties. But GMTS goes a step further than the Chemicals and Products Program, offering not only guidance for how the disclosure could take place, but providing a concrete harmonized format and modality for chemical information disclosure in the form of a list of harmful chemicals with defined disclosure thresholds. So the GMTS concept highlights that data about the chemical content of materials and products and hazard classes should be submitted to the global database, accessible to all stakeholders in the value chain. And the concept finally explains the importance of linking such information to individual products and how it could be done in practice. So information about the presence of harmful chemicals in materials and products above a defined threshold is the minimum information that stakeholders downstream of supply chains need to start with so that they can make informed decisions. So the initial GMTS list can be compiled from other lists of chemicals based on their hazardous properties, such as, for example, the European Union Substances of Very High Concern list, or lists of chemicals regulated by the chemical conventions, the Montreal Protocol, or the carcinogenic compounds identified by the International Agency on Research on Cancer. So it means that the GMTS list builds upon the best available collective assessments and compiles harmful chemicals to be disclosed into one list, the GMTS list, with defined disclosure thresholds. And if a global instrument adopts the GMTS approach, it would have its own process for nominating and adding chemicals to the list, so that it is a living list. So how can it help companies provide accurate information? I may say that currently the requirements for disclosing chemicals content information vary with different jurisdictions for different sectors and products. And this causes significant challenges, especially in developing and transition economies. So having just one globally harmonized standard to comply with based on the GMTS approach simplifies for all stakeholders involved in trade and level the playing field for everyone, irrespective of jurisdiction. And companies will know exactly what they must disclose, irrespective of supply chain or trade partner or jurisdiction. And of course, it will save company time and money. And all consumers will know exactly what information they are expected to get. It increases the safety of their health and also irrespective of jurisdictions. And regulatory agencies in low and middle income countries, they are often net importers of materials and products. And of course, they are obvious beneficiaries of the GMTS concept because mandatory costs for expensive chemical analysis and spot checks at the border for imported materials and products can be saved because information about the presence of hazardous chemicals in materials and products would mandatorily accompany imported products. So this is in short what the GMTS concept stands for.
Thank you very much, Olga. And indeed, as you mentioned, there are clear benefits both towards companies, but as well as consumers. I'm just wondering, are there any challenges or obstacles that hinder harmonized systems such as the GMTS from being further adopted? And if yes, what are ways to overcome them?
Yeah, so we think that the main obstacle is the reluctance of companies to disclose chemical information because of intellectual properties and confidential business information claims. However, such claims are actually unwarranted because the GMTS concept is based on the disclosure of chemical information above agreed thresholds. And it does not require disclosing information about concentrations of chemicals in materials and products. So a competitor can only copy a product if the identities of its constituent chemicals are disclosed jointly with the exact concentrations of the respective chemicals. So it is well known that confidential business information claims do not make sense if only the presence and identity of chemicals above agreed disclosure thresholds and their hazard classes are reported. And even sharing information about chemicals and their concentration ranges in individual materials and products does not compromise CBI protection. So another challenge or an obstacle is that small and medium-sized companies may fear that a globally harmonized standard is an administrative burden, while in fact it is quite the opposite. So if the GMTS concept is mandatory, companies only must comply with one standard instead of multiple national and industry standards. So to overcome this misunderstanding, we think that there should be awareness raising directed to individual companies and industries to overcome this challenge. So, and potentially one more obstacle is that large companies may be reluctant to adopt a globally harmonized standard if they already have their own transparency modalities for information sharing. So to overcome this obstacle, in developing a global solution for the GMTS, it is definitely helpful to invite large companies to share their experiences and regarding systems for data sharing and storage. So, but I may say that we have already gained some positive results in promoting the GMTS concept. For example, in the negotiations of the Plastic Treaty, mandatory transparency and traceability of disclosed information in individual materials and products, as well as labeling, are under discussion. And the minimum amount of information available to stakeholders in the value chain should be on hazardous chemicals in line with the GMTS concept. And if we get all the provisions, formats, and modalities for globally harmonized and mandatory chemical information disclosure in the plastic treaty, it will be easier to expand the concept to other materials than plastics in the future. And we also managed to get 2 targets on information sharing into the global framework on chemicals, replacing SICOM. So indicators for these targets will have to be developed. And one indicator could be the development of a negative list of chemicals for disclosure in line with the GMTS concept. And we also believe that it is essential to push for a resolution in the United Nations Environmental Assembly to start negotiations for a globally harmonized cross-sectoral transparency standard and traceability system. And we work with some countries on such potential resolution.
Thank you very much, Olga. That's really informative, and thank you for sharing your experience with working on the GMTS. I just to maybe go to Ahmad because Ahmad has been working with a lot of stakeholders in the fashion industry, and in fact, the DHC launched recently the Roadmap to Zero program, which is meant to lead the fashion industry in eliminating harmful chemicals from its global supply chain. And that DHC provides guidelines, platforms, and solutions for implementing safer chemical management. So Ahmad, talking about the report, the primary audience is, for the report that is being launched is manufacturers and retailers, as they're generally the most direct communicators on product performance and sustainability. From your experience, how do you see their how do you see their efforts, especially in the fashion sector that you have most experience on, to go beyond regulation and business as usual practices, and provide information on sustainability on products? And of course, if there are any good examples that you can mention, please feel free to do so. You're on mute, Ahmad.
Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, UNEP, for inviting ZDHC to be in a panel discussion. I would not jump directly the answer to your specific question, but before I would just like to give a couple of the background. What is ZDHC? Why we came into the market. I mean, I think there are a couple of things which are quite important when we are speaking about chemicals. I think from a consumer perspective and also from other, let's say the other stakeholder perspective, it is extremely important. Are we speaking about the chemicals? Are we speaking about the harmful, hazardous chemicals? So I think these are the 2 different aspects we need to really make a difference, because chemical, anything which is like polyester, water, cola, it can also be a chemical. So I think it's extremely important to say when we are speaking about the chemical, we are really speaking about the harmful, hazardous chemical substances. The second thing is that I think it has been already presented in the guiding principle that we are not speaking chemicals in the product because it has a complete different meaning, but we are speaking about chemicals in the product value chain. And this is where I think, we at DSC, zero discharge of hazardous chemicals as a foundation came into the picture, is that if you see from any sector specific, I mean, I think we are basically focusing on textile, apparel, footwear, leather industry. This is where, we are as an industry initiative. It has been basically as a challenge for us, from various campaign, from NGOs and also from various media, that, managing or looking harmful hazardous chemicals at the product level is not really a kind of a solution. What basically we are talking about the problem, because looking the harmful hazardous chemical substance at the product level is only which is helping from the product compliance perspective, and it is helping only the consumers which are basically wearing the clothes. I think the challenge for us came, 10 years or 12 years back, was that various campaign and NGOs and media saying that, okay, global brands, you guys are doing a good job with respect to hazardous chemical substance somewhere in the end of the product, which is helping only the consumer. But the problem is really lying in the harmful hazardous chemical substance in the entire production chain. And this is where I think the challenge for us came in, how we at DSC as a global brands initiative are managing, looking and identifying the harmful hazardous chemical substance right at the beginning where the manufacturing is basically starting. So this is where I think it has been a challenge for us. First, that we wanted to create a kind of an, let's say, the harmful hazardous chemical substance as a global harmonized list. And this is what we call as a MRSL, not as a RSL. RSL means restricted substances list. MRSL is a manufacturing restricted list. This is what I think what Olga has been mentioning. So for us, it has been really like to look what are the harmful hazardous chemical substances across various regulations, across various countries, across various kind of a demands globally in the market. So it has been really like looking harmful hazardous chemical substance right at the beginning, identifying them, and second challenge has been to find out the solution. So we at DSC started not only coming with a kind of an harmonizing and manufacturing restricted substances globally, with an agreement with various brands, and also at the same time to set up an infrastructure to have a safer chemical. So this is where we at DSC have come up with a kind of an industry level of the global guidelines. This is what we call ZDSC MRSL to be implemented and executed driven from the global brands to be implemented at the global supply chain level. One of the third key stakeholder for us has been the chemical manufacturers. They have been the key stakeholder for us to create and manufacture the safer alternatives right at the beginning, which are in conformity with the ZDSC MRSL. So this is where, I just wanted to say that, it is not just chemical at the product, because chemical at the product is just like, looking from a product compliance perspective, and it is very expensive and it is not the solution. So we, on an industry level, we started looking the engagement from the various global brands, suppliers, those who are manufacturing globally, and the chemical manufacturers who are manufacturing the safer alternatives. So we have created a kind of a world biggest global database, which what we call 94,000 safer alternatives, which are basically conforming that they are really in conformity with the ZDSC MRSL. So I just wanted to say that, from a consumer perspective, it is extremely important that we are not just simply giving information at the product level. This is where you have a various kind of a labeling program, but it is extremely important to look behind the whole vertical backward supply chain where the chemicals are being used, identifying them at each individual facility level at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 level, and then providing a kind of a sustainable chemical management system where, we are eliminating the problem, we are having a solution for the environment at the local level, national level, global. We are helping the consumers not to be exposed with the hazardous chemicals. And we are also helping the workers, millions of workers working in the factory. So this is a kind of a global framework, what basically we call ZDSC Roadmap to Zero program, where each individual stakeholder, they are playing an important role, which is really as a solution oriented, solving the problem, and at the same time creating a positive impact, not only from the health hazards and exposure perspective, but also other chemical related impact areas like greenhouse gas, water, waste, air, and circularity. So I just wanted to give you a little bit about the background, and then, Challenge basically is like, we have already achieved quite a lot of a critical mass. We are speaking about managing this program in more than 95 countries. And I think the challenge for us is really how we are scaling up, because the industry is quite big. And once basically we scale it up on a larger scale, and the next step for us is that how we are linking the MRSL with the RSL, which means at the product level. And that is where is quite important from the consumer's communication perspective, not just giving information at the individual supply chain level, but also transforming it from the facility level to the product level. And that is basically where we are moving now in the future, which will be helping from a consumer communication perspective.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. So collecting all this information. So as we know, the textiles sector the value chain can be quite long and expanding across countries and regions, and involving many different stakeholders. I assume that companies involved in the value chain are varying in size, in many other different aspects. What are some of the strategies that you have employed to raise awareness on this specific topic to the different kinds of companies, and also keep them engaged in providing the necessary information?
Yeah, it's a quite interesting point. I mean, I think, there are various kind of driving elements, I would say. A couple of the driving element is, one is basically, as you know, that UNIA and UNEP, we call it as a planetary boundaries. So where climate change, biodiversity, and chemicals have been defined to be as three big criteria. So because I think we know that when we are speaking about climate change, biodiversity, I think chemical and harmful hazardous chemicals, they are really a kind of a driver for climate change issues and also the biodiversity and the nature loss. So you have basically one thing, this is where various kind of a different regulations coming into the picture, various impact, and chemical has been considered to be a very high risk area for various kind of an corporate world. This is where, we see a major trend that majority of the big corporate, they have been really realizing that, the chemical is one of the high risk areas, because if something happens at the product level or at a supply chain level, it burns out quite fast from the business image perspective and the image from the corporate world. There is also another drive where you can see that the financial sectors is also really taking within their ESG criteria chemical as one of the important criteria, where when they are investing money at the corporate world, I think they are also looking how the corporate world, where they are financing and they are investing money, they are managing this risk related to the chemical. And of course, Olga has mentioned about the global chemical framework, which has been signed last year in Bonn, where 179 countries have really come up with a kind of a voluntary commitment to managing chemical management at individual country level. So these are all different drives, basically, which I think majority of the corporate, or let's say the brands and the retailers, they are really realizing that it is something quite important, to be integrated into the overall sustainability measures and the actions to be taken. Second part, I think, is quite interesting. This is where we at DSC are also moving that, looking and managing harmful hazardous chemical, or having this chemical management is not just from the health and hazards and environment perspective, it is also as a business benefit to them. This is where we at DSC are also coming up kind of a business case scenario, that if you are really managing harmful hazardous chemical substances right at the beginning in a proper way, it has also a lot of business value. It's also a lot of the economic value. So these are all kind of a drivers, which we see that this trend is quite positive. I mean, day by day there are new retailers and brands we are intending to join at DSC, and in the same time it is also accelerating the implementation at the supply chain level. So these are basically a kind of how we are basically doing a kind of a proactive, let's say, the promotion and a kind of an engagement. We are doing various kind of a collaboration with like-minded organizations, where they have an environmental and sustainability program where chemical is one of the indicator. So this collaboration with the like-minded organization is playing an important role to accelerate and scale it up. And we are also engaging with the financial institutions, where basically, they are realizing that, the ZDSC program is one of the ESG criteria, and also the engagement with various development agencies, philanthropic organizations, public institutions like UNEP, UNIDO, many others. And these are all a kind of a different drives where we are basically scaling up the program on a higher level.
Thank you, indeed. That's very insightful experience, which I think what you mentioned can be what is valid for the fashion industry. I guess these are drivers that could be relevant for pretty much any value chain. And you mentioned also collaboration, which is mentioned in the aspirational principles, as Stuart mentioned before.
There is another additional element I just wanted to add up, that it's not just, we as a fashion industry, or we as a textile, apparel, footwear, leather industry, we took it as a kind of a challenge quite early stage. But we see also a trend that many other sectors, electronic sectors, cosmetic sector, automotive sectors, toys industry sector, they are also moving now, shifting their pattern, not looking the harmful hazardous chemicals at the product level, because this is not a solution. They are also really looking now the chemical management at the production value chain level based on the MRSL. So there is also really a trend. This is what I think what Olga was mentioning about within the United Nations, the global chemical framework. The cross industry is really moving a little bit in that direction. There is a dynamism, and I think the collaboration with various industry will be quite interesting, because there is a 30% on an average overlapping with the supply chain. And the chemical industry, which is manufacturing, is not manufacturing for the fashion industry, but they are manufacturing also for the other sector. So this is also a kind of a dynamism moving on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. And talking about the chemical industry, so our third panelist, Sriyanka Mendis, as we said, is the Research and Development Manager at Union Chemicals, which is a trading organization for chemicals and products specialized in waterborne polymer dispersions. So they're a supplier of chemical products for paints, inks, packaging, detergents, cosmetics, rubber, latex, textiles, food, pharmaceuticals. So as Ahmad already mentioned, the chemical industry provides chemicals to a lot of different downstream sectors. So Sriyanka, coming to you, and from your perspective, let's say from a company's perspective, what are some of the challenges that you're facing in offering more sustainable products that address chemical impacts? And also, what are the benefits in fact investing in offering such more sustainable products?
Thank you, Marcus, and also thank you for UNEP organizing this kind of webinar. When you look at the challenges of offering sustainable products addressing chemical impacts, I would like to highlight 3 challenges what we face. As we point out, first is knowledge acquiring. In here, there is no single place to acquire knowledge of chemical impacts and the sustainable product manufacturing and the sustainable products. We could done a lot of efforts in different means to gather the information when offering sustainable products by addressing chemical impacts. But we overcome these challenges, one, through our NCPC Sri Lanka, and also we have a lot of support and lot of help with the UNEP UseTex tool when we develop such kind of sustainable product. The second point is we have to look into a lot of R&D and it increases the product cost and production cost. Therefore, the product cost increases and the price cost increases. Due to the competitive market in Sri Lanka, it was very difficult to promote these sustainable products, which we address the chemical impacts to the market. The third point is, in this area, the attitudes, knowledge, and behaviors of the consumers. It's very bit of difficult to understand them, what are the benefits and how it's useful for the companies for the sustainable production. Those are the three challenges I understand when offering this product addressing the chemical impacts. The next question is the benefits. What are the benefits we have taken by using these promotions? First is we acquire the knowledge of new concepts like sustainable production, green chemistry principles, use text tool, and new environment-friendly standards like eco-labeling. The next one is we had a national and international recognition of doing those things as a company. Maybe very few companies in Sri Lanka adhere to those sort of sustainable products. VI is one of them. And the most important thing is which contributed to environment protection and safety health of humans. That is another benefit. And also we are having the benefit of market demand from whom they are concerned the sustainable products. There are some customers and consumers who concern more sustainable products are very good relationship with us. Next one is we are very keen to have a knowledge with interested parties. We can share the knowledge. Those are the benefits. In point out, I mentioned when offering the sustainable product addressing the chemical impacts. Yes, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Sriyanka. So you mentioned that one of the challenges is higher cost, but then you mentioned also that you also appeal to at least a certain segment of the market which is more concerned with sustainability performance of products. So that means that in fact, despite the higher cost, there is at least a part of the market that is willing to pay the higher costs for more sustainable products. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. The Sri Lankan market, there are two ways. One is price-driven market, and one is environmental concern, quality concern market. Therefore, by doing this kind of sustainable products addressing to chemical impacts, we are very easily gather the environment concern, high quality market. But we are having a bit of difficulty of capturing the cost-driven market. That's I can say it. Definitely, this is very important by looking at the environment concerns.
And from your experience, do you see that this might change in regards with cost, for example, economies of scale or better practices? Would you be able to decrease costs and appeal more to the cost-driven consumer base?
Yeah, initially there is a cost addition, but in the long run, what I feel is these kind of concept implementation in long run reduce the cost as well as saving the environment. Now in Sri Lanka itself, now moving towards this kind of sustainable product and sustainable production, but it's depend on the sector we are addressing.
And in terms of regulations and frameworks, according to your experience, what would be necessary to improve industry-wide practices when it comes to regulations and frameworks?
Yeah, what I see is one central national body should be implement those regulations and practicals and guidelines and framework, so they can be communicated to all manufacturers, suppliers, and consumers with respect to the aspects of this concept. And also those bodies can develop roadmaps to with each and every manufacturers and consumers for make the sustainability and the sustainable product. And also training and awareness should be given. And also one area, because some people are willing to go for this addressing the chemical impacts with sustainable products, but there are some issues in financial aspects. Therefore, the body should help them, the person who are willing to do so, to have a sort of a financial support for them. Those are the things I think that the regulation body perspectives.
Thank you, Sriyanka. And going to Union Chemicals specifically, so your company carries the Sri Lanka eco label, which is in fact a voluntary eco label. Could you elaborate a bit more why you decided to have it, and why do you see it as important for the chemical sector? And going a bit beyond, if you can also share how do you believe facilitates informed purchasing decisions by consumers in relation to sustainability?
Actually, our companies, we are really knowledge gaining and environment concerned company. Therefore, we want to know, we decided to go such kind of labeling systems because we can get a lot of knowledge sharing. There's special concept like energy conservation techniques, water conservation techniques, and special use stocks tool, which is initiated by UNEP. Those are actually encourage our people's knowledge and make the companies more sustainability. And also what we think is eco-label is addressed starting from the raw material extraction to the during all the life cycle of the product. That is another thing. And also it can help to avoid the hazard chemicals, basically all the RSL chemicals, and promote the sustainable product. And also it has as the international and national recognition for this eco-labeling. Then the next question is the importance of this for chemical sector. People can understand and identify who are the companies who's concerned about the environment and who's eco-friendly actions. And also they can, if somebody is willing to do so, have a perspective of going for eco-label, they can benchmark those companies and acquire the knowledge and put the developments. And also we could have convey the message. The chemical sector, most of them think that chemical manufacturing is destroying the environment and destroying the society. But having sort of a eco-label, we are addressing all the environment aspects that people know that this is not a society damaging, this is a society and environment protective and very helpful mechanism. And in the long run, what I feel was this is help to reduce the cost of production. Initially, there may be some more, but with the long run, it is reduce the cost of production. Yes, Marcus.
Indeed, thank you, Sriyanka. That's indeed very very clear. So we have some time to take some questions from the audience, and I see there are already some questions in the Q&A. So I will try to pick some of those, and I will try to address them to one of the panelists. But if any other of you would like to answer, please feel free to do so. So I will take one question on IPR. So I think Olga, you mentioned before how the GMTS is not expected to infringe, let's say, on intellectual property rights of any companies. But one person from the audience is asking whether intellectual property and competition law gets in the way of disclosure mechanisms and overall information availability, and if yes, if there are certain aspects, at least of it, that you think should change. So Olga, perhaps you can touch upon this, but again, if any of the other panelists feels like doing so, please jump in after Olga.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the question. First of all, I'm not a lawyer, so it's a challenge to say how law get in the way. I mean, what changes should be in the law. But I must say that the lawyers should definitely know that back in 2006, when more than 100 countries adopted the so-called Dubai Declaration as a package together with the strategic approach to international chemicals management. So this Dubai Declaration, paragraph 22, states that hazardous chemicals do not fall under the scope of confidential business information because of their health and environment impact. So the laws that touch upon confidential business information should definitely quote the Dubai Declaration, paragraph 22. And this is in terms of the law, but in terms of the chemicals, as I said, so our GMTS concept requires the disclosure of the identity of chemicals and their hazard properties, but not the concentration. So chemicals need to be disclosed above a certain threshold, not a concentration. It means that the competitor, if he gets this information, it will not be possible to duplicate the product, because only information about the identity and the hazard class of hazardous chemicals above a certain threshold will be disclosed.
Thank you very much, Olga. And I think that that should pretty much answer the question. I'm just looking at the questions here.
Maybe I can add up something.
Feel free, Ahmad. Yes, go ahead.
I think it is extremely important, for the chemical industry, is that, what we are speaking about, the chemical or chemical composition or chemical product, from the environmental and health and exposure perspectives. We're really speaking about anything which is related to the environment, anything which is related to the hazards. We are not really touching a kind of a trade-related information. So there are two different categories of the properties or information. One is the trade-related, and other is really like, what this chemical formulation is having a kind of is it in conformity with certain kind of an prohibited, or and let's say the intentional use of the harmful substances. So I think this is where, things are really always going in discussion, and there is always certain kind of a confusion. Is it a matter related to the trade, which is where, the competition law and intellectual property comes in the picture? But I think the main orientation is really like, how this chemical product or chemical formulation is really in conformity with a kind of a voluntary standard, or it is in conformity with the regulations. So this is where I think, there is always a kind of a certain confusion comes in. So we need to differentiate that aspects is extremely important. Additional point is that, whenever the chemical industry or chemical manufacturer coming up with a kind of a claim that their product or chemical product is in conformity with whatever regulations and whatever, let's say, the standard they are really claiming for, it is important that it's creating a kind of an, the business value creation, and that is extremely important. It's not really going much more on any kind of an intellectual property or the competition.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. I don't know if Sriyanka, you have something to add to what Olga and Ahmad already said on this. if not, we can move on to another question. So Yulia Gracheva mentions that eco labels and certifications are mentioned in most cases. Yulia is wondering if eco labels are considered to be the most recommended solution for providing consumer information in this regard. So I think this is something that perhaps every panelist might have an opinion on this. No.
Maybe I can just start with, I think there are various ways of, communicating how basically the product has been produced under certain sustainability criteria, including the chemical management part. I think the main point is that this is where, we are all discussing on how reliable information it is, what is the data behind that claim. I mean, whether it is an eco label, whether it is a kind of an claim on the information, it's extremely important. What is the reliability? And I think this is where the guiding principle presented by Stuart, is extremely important. What is the transparency? What is the reliability? What is basically a kind of a relevance and the accessibility and clarity. So it is really important, and this is where I think the European Commission under the Green Deal, they are really moving on much more. It's not basically it's what is the reliable data, what is the reliable information, which is basically behind any kind of a claim. And any claim should not be subjective. It should be based on the fact-based information. And I think this is where, this digital product passport, which will be basically coming as a regulation, is trying to harmonize a certain framework, what needs to be communicated to consumers, what needs to be communicated to the various economic players and the regulators. And I think this is extremely important that we have a systematic framework and we have very harmonized way of communication. And I think it is important what is the credibility of the information being. And I think this is where, when we are speaking about the disclosure, it is not really, what is important is the disclosure. It is behind what is basically as a disclosure, as an information, the reliability, the credibility of the information. Is it really verified? Who has verified? What is basically the authenticity of the data which has been used in that claim is extremely important. And second aspect is that this eco label should not be just giving an information, but it should also be giving a kind of what is the impact which that eco label has been really created with respect to the whole product value chain, at the production level and also at the various other stages. So these are all key elements when we are really speaking about anything which is from the communication perspective.
In this regard, then I guess that one value of the eco labels is that there is a kind of a standardized framework that can sort of guarantee this objectivity of the information provided, right?
Yeah, this is where you see that, the authorization to the consumers regulation, what is coming in, is really speaking about, I mean, it's not really going to prohibit, individual eco labels or labeling existing. They are just bringing it into an harmonized framework that, everybody's speaking about the authentic and reliable information. And it is basically fact-based, that it is not creating a kind of a confusion, and it is not creating a kind of greenwashing. So I think these are the main objective where, the direction is really moving on in that way. Yeah.
If I may, I would like to add to this. I actually agree that consumers should be aware of misleading claims about like product safety or environmental friendliness. And these claims are known as greenwashing, right? And this can mislead consumers and actually deprive them of having an in-depth information and understanding what product to choose. And I also think that consumers should understand and support the need for more transparency to information about chemical content of products and its traceability in individual products. Consumers should well understand that the lack of transparency and traceability of chemical information is difficult for them to make informed choices that will be best for their health. And the problem is true for many sectors, including toys and textiles, and where product labels do not include information about the presence of toxic chemicals in products. And usually consumers can identify the presence of toxic chemicals in products only if laboratory analyses are conducted. But how should the consumer know what chemical information to request or what chemicals to test? And chemical-related claims, they should actually be available to consumers for all products, whether those products are sold in store or online. And unfortunately, however, a customer cannot hold the company that runs the internet platform responsible for the harm from a product that is sold by a third party on the platform. So internet platforms also need more understanding of what information on chemical contents they should ask for, and as there are so many national standards and legislations to ensure compliance. And I also think that consumers need to support the idea of mandatory globally harmonized chemical transparency standard, and that it should go hand in hand with the traceability of chemical information in individual products. And at the minimum, consumers need to have information about harmful chemicals in products based on the globally accepted list of such chemicals. That should be regularly revised as more chemicals can be added to this list based on new scientific data. So as I noted, so what we are doing while promoting the GMTS concept is that this chemical content information should be uploaded to the database that is that is open for all stakeholders in the value chain, meaning to the consumers, to the retailers, of course, to the governmental institutions, to the recyclers. So this database should be accessible to everyone in the value chain, so that all stakeholders know what chemicals are in products, and not only what chemicals are in products, but also this information should be traceable in individual products. And we suggested different options for how to do this in practice in our new information document that will be available on our website shortly, where we describe the practical steps forward. And Ahmed mentioned the digital product passport. So we believe that information about chemical content in individual products should be submitted to this publicly accessible database in a format like in the digital chemicals passport of a product, in a format of a digital chemical passport to this database. And from this database, consumers may have like a device, like a QR code, to scan individual products and get this information from the database on their, say, for example, mobile device, to understand what chemicals are in products they want to buy.
And Olga, talking about consumers, what do you think consumers can do to, so assuming that, as you say, that assuming that they're aware about the impact of chemicals or hazardous chemicals in products, what do you think that consumers can do to kind of contribute to, or contribute to better communication of chemicals in products, meaning to motivate companies to become better at communicating such information?
Yeah, so as I said, so consumers are valuable members of the value chain. By value chain, I mean the chain that is not the supply chain, but it is beyond the supply chain. That includes consumers and recyclers and retailers, and consumers are valuable players because they make a decision. They should make a decision what product to buy and on what basis. But if they do not have information about what hazardous chemicals are in these products, they are sort of like deprived of making the right choice while purchasing the product. And further on, they cannot actually support recyclers because they cannot recycle these products properly. Because they have no information about the presence of hazardous chemicals in these products. I agree with Ahmad that it is very important to ensure that products do not contain hazardous chemicals like before they're manufactured, upon the design, at the design stage. This is very important, but unfortunately, this is not the case at the moment. And still many consumer products have like numerous thousands of toxic chemicals, including such products as toys or textiles. If consumers understand well that they need to request information about the presence of hazardous chemicals, that will be a huge breakthrough. But they need to understand what information to request about what chemicals. And that is why we are advocating for having this globally harmonized list of hazardous chemicals based on hazardous properties, right, of these chemicals. And that should be a living list so that new chemicals are added as science becomes available. And to start with, we suggest to start with chemicals which are already approved globally as being hazardous. And these are chemicals regulated by the Chemicals Conventions and by the European Union regulations. So the initial list is there, but it needs to be compiled properly. And so that consumers know what they should know what they should expect to get, what information they should expect to get, right? And also the companies should know what information to provide to consumers based on this initial list. And of course, each company could go beyond this list and disclose more information about more chemicals. That will be, of course, very helpful. But the initial, harmonized, globally harmonized list should be in there and should be linked to individual products.
Thank you very much, Olga. And like Sriyanka said, once the information is there, there is a demand for it, like Sriyanka said. So indeed true. I see Ahmad has his hand up. Is it related to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add up things, where we at DSC are moving in a direction of, when it comes to a communication to a consumer level or to any other players, in the market. I mean, right now, our focus is that we are really managing the harmful hazardous chemical substance as a global list for the sector, which is being managed at the factory level in the value chain. But we are now moving, a bit more on the product level. So we are trying to really translate the chemical recipe information from the factory level to the individual product level, which is possible because when you have the information of the chemical recipe at the factory level, you can basically translate this into an individual product lot. And this is where we are basically moving the chemical information from the factory level, which is basically the value chain, translating it into the product level. And this is where we are linking the MRSL to RSL. And that basically will be providing, we need some kind of an technological information and technological buildup. And this will be basically the important part. So our idea in the future is that there is a QR code, whatever way framework it is, that, anybody, whether it is a consumer, whether it is any other player, they can really get the traceability of the whole chemical recipe in the entire value chain where the product has been. So this is where we are basically planning to move in that direction, which will basically be helping, across all the value chain from the product traceability perspective with respect to the chemicals.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ahmed. So we're really, it's a really interesting discussion, but I'm afraid we will not be able to take any more questions as we're really reaching the end of our allotted time. I hope that for the questions that are still there, the audience managed to get at least some answer to it. And I would like to mention again that my colleague Miley's put in the chat the link to the report and relevant link. So if you haven't done so, it's a very informative report. Feel free to take a look. So with this, Arnau, I give the word back to you for the closing.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Again, I thank all speakers for their very edifying interventions, and particularly to UNEP for bringing us together in the One Planet Network Consumer Information Program to really share experience, learn from one another, be able to build on the work of each one of us, and especially influence policymaking processes, but also consumers' behaviors that will bring us closer to the protection of people and the planet. Thank you very much for today's exciting communications and interventions, and I look forward to the next time. Thank you and goodbye.